Good evening and welcome to the Stained Glass Museum's third and final online webinar in this year, the year of lockdown, and our first online lectures. My name is Jasmine Allen, Director of the Stained Glass Museum. Welcome everyone. We are delighted that we've had over 100 people register for this evening's talk with Rachel Mulligan. If you've got a question for Rachel, and we do hope that you'll have some questions for Rachel today, please put it in the Q&A and then we can facilitate those questions when Rachel joins us at the end of her talk. Right, I will stop sharing that poll and get on to the exciting bits, which is to actually welcome and introduce our speaker, Rachel. And at this point, I will ask Rachel to just turn her video on so that you can all see that she is there.
Hello.
Hello, good evening, Rachel. It's my real pleasure that Rachel has joined us this evening and agreed to give us a talk at the last talk of our season. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with artist Rachel Mulligan's work, and if you know the Stained Glass Museum, you will know that she has exhibited several times. We love her work. With a background in fine art, Rachel specialised in printmaking before discovering stained glass at an adult education class. And she went on to study at Central St Martin's and then at Chelsea School of Art. And since the mid-90s, she has completed many commissions for homes across Surrey and for public buildings, including Haslemere Museum, the Cassel Hospital, Isleworth Town Hall, and Castletown Primary School. She's an associate of the British Society of Master Glass Painters and a Freeman of the Worshipful Company of Glaziers. And Rachel teaches stained glass as well from her garden studio in Surrey, which I think is where all of the panels that we're going to be looking at today were made. And the panels that Rachel is going to be talking to us today is actually works that she's created for exhibition mostly, as well as one piece which was a commissioned work. And all of the panels have something in common in my mind, and I convinced Rachel to talk about all of them, and that is that they are kind of narrative themes, exploring cycles of life, and all have a personal touch, but relate to a kind of historic starting point, a springboard and inspiration, and Rachel has reimagined them. So the most recent of these, which you will have seen, I'm sure, on social media, is the Tinker Tailor series, which has reimagined this nursery rhyme, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, for our present times in COVID crisis. And those panels are currently at exhibition at the Stained Glass Museum, and they will be there for the next 5-6 months. So after hearing about them this evening, we hope you will also come and actually see the panels alongside some original sketches and lino prints. So I'm really excited to hear Rachel talk about some of these panels, which I have seen already. So over to you, Rachel. I will let you share your screen, and we will have questions at the end when I will return.
Okay, thanks, Jasmine. I'll just see if this works. Let's get it big. There we go. I can just hear Father Christmas coming down the street, which he does every year, and he might knock on the door in a minute. Anyway, thank you for that introduction, and hello to everyone out there. It's a bit disconcerting to be talking to you without seeing anyone. I won't be able to tell if anyone's dropping off or losing interest, but I hope you'll bear with me. I just have to firstly say I'm sorry, Jasmine, but the series doesn't include a spy. I think that's possibly a John le Carré film or something, and mine includes Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor. So if anyone's tuned in for the spy, I'm afraid they'll have to wait for another series of work, I think. Anyway, let's start the slideshow. There we go. So the first series goes back to 2010. And I made these speculatively, as Jasmine was saying, because I wanted to start working with figures. And it's quite difficult when I'd been doing commissions back to back for so long to take the time out of those and do what I wanted to do. But I decided this was important, so I carved out the time. And I was influenced by some panels that I saw many years ago when I first took up stained glass. I'm sure many of you will recognise this from the V&A. And it's one of the labours of the months there. And what I really loved about this is the depiction of action. You can really see that knife chopping into the vine. You can see the basket that's been woven and is holding the grapes. And it shows us a lot about the everyday, life, people of the time, which obviously now we have photos and films and everything, but this is a really lovely record of that. So I suppose in my head I wanted to do something that was recording the everyday life of the current time. This is another one. You can see the scattering of the seeds. This is October, that was September before. And you can see the little patch of ground that hasn't had any seeds yet. And he's just about to throw them on there from his little basket he's carrying. So I set about making these panels, and they were inspired by a year on the allotment that I shared with some friends. Heather is here sawing the wood for the raised beds we made. And we roped in another couple of friends. And we spent a few years there when the kids were at infant school. And it was just a really fun time. We'd meet up on a Friday morning and have some cake and have a chat and do some gardening. So it's actually, looking at them now, it's really nice that I recorded that time. There's Heidi doing some watering. I should say these panels are about 10 centimetres wide and about 50 centimetres high. So they are really quite small, and that's probably 4mm lead they're leaded with. So I was trying to create the feeling that it could be on a larger scale while actually making them very manageable. This is the sort of summer months, and we can see some of my family in there. There's my youngest pushing the wheelbarrow. Bern, who's my stepdad, is in the hat. And this little scene is showing our allotment, which was full of marigolds and weeds, and our onions were not particularly large. And then the neighbouring allotment has a very neat, well-planned space with entering vegetables for the village show. So at the time, I was thinking about people, trying to draw them from memory. I'm trying to capture some kind of, I wouldn't say portraiture, but some kind of likeness to them, if I could. In this one, we've got Tommy, who's my eldest, who's carrying a pumpkin with his friend Jacob. And you'll see him a bit later as well. There's the cake rota that we're doing in the winter, sitting in the greenhouse. So really these were just, I wouldn't say experimental, but they were taking me off in a different direction that I'd chosen I wanted to go. And it was a few years later that Alison Patterson, who's the curator at Godalming Museum, contacted me and said they were interested in buying them. And they'd seen them at an exhibition I'd had as I was making them. I'd booked the exhibition what I thought was way in advance, but they were taking rather longer than I'd planned. And as each one was finished, I'd take it down and hang it up. And by the time the exhibition ended, they were all there and finished. And then I didn't really think anything more of it until she contacted me and said they wanted to buy them for the museum. And I was absolutely delighted, obviously, and even more delighted that the V&A helped fund the purchase. that was just really exciting that they were giving that endorsement to my work, and also that was where I'd first seen the pieces that inspired it. So it was a few years later that I came back to my own work. I found that if an idea was buzzing around my head long enough, I kind of needed to get it out, and just had to make the time to do it. So eventually I did with this one. And this was inspired by Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage poem, which I must have seen on the London Underground or read at school. It had lodged in my head as a really neat and succinct way of talking about a lifespan. And I wanted to link that to the seasons, so that the year is seen unfolding and the life begins and ends in winter. So I was influenced, I suppose. I loved these children's books illustrations. This is Janet and Alan Alberg, Peepo. And the text is very rhythmical and is about what the baby's seeing. But there's a whole subtext in the pictures that tells the story of the father who's come home from the war and sees his family for one day and then has to go back. And the general clutter of the home, that again, it's about what sort of things people were using, what toys they had, all those things that I wanted to reflect. And I also loved this book by Raymond Briggs. I was brought up on Father Christmas and Fungus the Bogeyman and all those books. And this one is one that he tells the story of his parents' life, Ethel and Ernest. And it's a very visual book, done from memory, obviously. And again, it's a very moving, I find it a very moving book. So I wanted to tell the story of the Seven Ages, and I knew it was about a lifespan. But I didn't know quite who to base it on or whether to do a generic one. But in the end, I decided to base it on my dad's life, which is quite colourful and ordinary, but interesting as well. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. It's not that ordinary, but okay. So he was brought up in Middlesbrough. He was the 6th of 9 children, and I've depicted him in red in each of them, so you can identify him quite quickly. This is winter. Again, lots and lots of detail in these. I'll just show you a close-up of each one as we go through. So we've got some of his sisters here and a brother, and the stove, the things that Dad would tell us about, how his mum made the bread every week and they never had a shop bought cake, things like that. I wanted to get those sort of little elements into the story. In spring, this is maybe March here, it's a rainy day. He was obviously in the war, the war was going on around. While some of the children were being evacuated from London into Middlesbrough, others, like his sister, were being evacuated out of Middlesbrough. So that's kind of alluded to in the newspaper. I particularly like the way the raindrops came out. They're engraved on the glass, and then mixing flux is added, so that it makes it very shiny. I don't use any acid on this work. For those of you who are practitioners, it's all engraved. This is when my dad moved to London, and it was at college, at St Mary's College in Twickenham at Strawberry Hill, and he met my mum, and here he is serenading her with a poem. All these panels, as I say, are imagined. They're not trying to evoke rather than be accurate records, shall we say. This is the number 33 bus that goes from Richmond to Teddington, where I have my studio, and I used to get on that every day. It's a little homage to my hometown. And here we have the soldier panel, which is really, I couldn't imagine my dad ever been in the army. So, but I did a marching theme, because we used to get taken on many marches, CND, Anti-Nazi League, and the Labour Day marches. And in this one, we've got my elder brother, younger brother, and sister in a pushchair. And Nikki, my stepmom, is in this one, in purple. Here's a little detail of the policeman. Again, 4mm lead, so it's very, very tiny detail. Now we're getting on to late summer here. And this is the justice. So he's being quite stern and telling off a student for being late. There's a detail. You can. I was trying to evoke the 80s in this one. So there's the Rubik's Cube. There's the ashtray, which I think all teachers smoked in the staff room. And the little madness badge on the book bag. Things I can actually remember in that one. And this is a bit more current now. 6th age shifts. So now we're in, you know, the autumn of the year, and there's some Sudoku and walnuts to keep young and keep the brain going. And there's my dad writing a play and photos of us all on the wall. So I had to imagine the last scene as well. I tried to do one that I thought he would like, and in fact this is one of his favourite panels. So surrounded by the family at the end of life, and we're back in winter now, and that's my sister again, and my older brother there. So I thought I'd share this one. The first photo was taken in, I don't know, the late 50s or early 60s. And it's my parents when they were at Strawberry Hill House at one of the balls there. And when I had the exhibition there, again, I hadn't quite finished all the panels. I had the last one still to do. So we put back the private view for a couple of weeks. And by the time the private view came around, the last panel was finished. And we took this photo of my dad and me there, which a lot of people think I look like my mum. There we go. And here she is. This is more recent now. We've moved up to last year. So this panel was commissioned by the Royal College of Nursing. It's actually 3 panels, but it was for their exhibition. And the brief was very broad. They wanted to show the emotions of modern nursing, and to have workshops with nurses who would do some practical stained glass work, and also discuss what was involved in the emotions, and I would be there and learn from that, and then create a piece of work in response to it. So I selected a lot of images, mostly from Pinterest, and a lot of them were stamps from around the world and vintage images of, you know, nursing in the war, and some more modern ones. And I collected all these together and ran 3 workshops, one at the National Glass Centre in Sunderland, one at the Stained Glass Museum in Ely, which Jasmine took part in, and one at Watts Gallery, just up the road from me in Surrey. And then a few that when I'd come up with the design and I knew that there were a few gaps, then I had some more people come to my studio and did these. So these were engraved and painted, and then I brought them back to the studio and fired them. And I tried not to change them too much. I just added a bit of tone and some of the detail around the edges if I needed it. So it's quite a big theme, emotions in nursing. And there were so many different types of nursing. I decided to split it into 3 panels. So we've got the beginning of life, which deals with midwifery, and there's a student nurse. And the border, I've used as many of the tiles as possible that were made. And I've also used some text from nurses who had come to the country from abroad to work. And it was their kind of testimonials of when they arrived. So this is really about letters and letter writing and stamps from around the world and the start of life. All the lettering was hand done with clove oil mixed with the pigment and done with a dip pen and scratch back. There's a detail of the middle bit. You can see the baby one hanging upside down there as well. And in the middle of life, we're dealing with mental health nursing here. And this goes back to a time after I'd graduated from fine arts and moved back to Richmond, and I was volunteering at the Cassel Hospital, which was where my mum was teaching. And I was working with some of the kids doing art. So although I wasn't intentionally thinking of a particular nurse at the beginning, this did end up looking rather like one of my mum's friends from that time. And the patient is, I was thinking of a friend of mine who had gone to the castle and had some counselling and come out and turned his life around. So these thoughts were in my head while I was doing it, as well as trying to deal with the wider issues of nursing, such as the blood pressure monitor and the more that the sort of the side that the Royal College of Nursing wanted to include, as well as the personal stuff. Such as this, one of their campaigns is parity of esteem, which is to get mental health nursing on a parity with physical health nursing. So, and in the border, I used quotes that nurses had, that people had written to thank nurses for their work they'd done. So I was tracing their handwriting, and again, a little panel made by one of the nurses that's included. And then the final panel, the end of life. This one deals with home, being cared for at home at the end of life. So we've got my stepfather here again, Bern, who my mum was looking after and caring for while she was supported by nurses at home. And I suppose what I was trying to do was deal, or what my work tries to do, is deal with quite difficult issues, but with a kind of lightness of touch. So things like the cat on the bed, or my mum in her Crocs, these things that just make it a bit more rather like medieval glass. You could have some very big theme, but there would be little kind of absurdities in it as well. So, the border in this one, because it was end of life, a lot of them are related to war nursing and come off images from propaganda type things, from posters. And the words are from by a poet and nurse, Molly Case, which you can look up if you. These are all on my website. You can look at them in more detail. Yes, the nurse standing up is slightly reminiscent of my sister, who's a nurse. I was thinking of her when I was doing that one. And then that brings us on to the current work, the Tinker Tailor series. And this was this shot is from a piece the BBC did in the studio a couple of weeks ago when they came and talked to me about it. I knew that I wanted to have some kind of artistic response to the pandemic when it started, but I didn't know what it was going to be. And during one of the family chat things, I put on a picture of Tommy making some curtains for his bedroom. And my dad said, oh, I remember when I first came to London in the 50s, I saw this tailor sitting cross-legged sewing in the basement. And I said, oh, I think I've got a picture of that somewhere. And I looked in my sketchbook and I found this, which I'd drawn about 20 years ago when I was teaching at the adult college, and a student had brought them in. She'd bought these two in auction, and I really loved them. I was captivated by them, actually, but I didn't know anything about them. So I put it on Instagram, and I was really excited when someone told me they were by Charles Payne and Daisy Luther and gave me the website, and I found the next two, well, two more of them. So I sketched them. And I think it was while I was doing those drawings that the ideas started to, settle in my mind that I could do a modern take on this. And there were links on how you could, how I could depict the different roles to make them relevant to the pandemic. So these are my responses. I've taken the lettering. I just used that straight off the back. And what I really wanted to do with these ones was really to push myself to do a more economical style of glass painting. So much less detail, much less tone, but still to have the same sort of storytelling element, but just without filling every inch of it with detail. So there's more space in these. So again, the first one was inspired by my dad, who was banging the drum and the saucepans. And even he got out a lad like that during the 8 o'clock clapping on a Thursday night. And obviously I had to do Tommy as the tailor because he was the one who started the whole idea with his sewing. The soldier was inspired by the building of the the Nightingale hospitals. And I was watching a lot more news at that point than I normally do. And it was just, images after images of the cruise ships trying to dock and not being allowed in different countries because they had corona cases on. And this is before, when you could count the numbers in the dozens. The rich man, I don't do portraiture as such, but I am interested in trying to capture something about someone if I know them. Well, I don't know him, obviously, but I was thinking of Boris Johnson, imagining him in silk pajamas and a very plush dressing gown. He was in hospital at the time, and it just seemed the right sort of image to use, and then contrast that with the poor man who has no PPE and is cleaning in a care home. The beggar man, I did put myself in this one doing the shopping because it just seemed to be endless queuing with that black and yellow tape, and very hot at that point. I wanted the beggar man to look very well dressed and to be someone who's perhaps might have fallen through the cracks of PPE, of furlough and the self-employment scheme, and just finding that the community are supporting him with the community fridge and so on. And the thief is obviously quite self-explanatory. So when this piece was aired a couple of weeks ago on the BBC, I had a few emails from naval personnel saying the flag I'd used wasn't a quarantine flag, which I said it was. And I'm no expert, and to be honest, they probably don't even hoist a flag these days. But I liked the image of it, kind of flowing in the wind. And according to Tintin, it did mean quarantine at some point, perhaps with the other one though. Anyway, just teaches me to do more research in future. There we go. And when I posted these on Facebook, someone, I think in the States, was trying to decipher them. I said, "Oh, the tailor's, he's making the scrubs, and he's so poor he hasn't got any shoes." And that reminded me of the shoemaker, the elves and the shoemaker, where the little helpers come along and they're so poorly dressed that in the end the shoemaker and his wife make them their own shoes and clothes, which was a book I loved when I was little. But the actual reason that he doesn't have any shoes is because Tommy very rarely wears shoes, even outside in the winter. And I hadn't even thought about that other connection. But now that I have, I really like the fact that people are going to read things into it, and it is a little bit intriguing, but you know, why doesn't he? Jasmine mentioned that I'd done printmaking originally, and during the lockdown, I suppose I had a bit more time. There was no classes on, and I could spend a bit longer on this kind of personal work. So I went back to lino cuts to see if I still had that in me, and I was quite pleased to see that I could still use the cutter, and I had some old bits of lino that I dusted off, and so I made this as well, and this is for sale in the museum and on my website. So if anyone is interested in that, just head on there. And I think that's about it, really. I just wanted to say a little plug for the British Society of Master Glass Painters Centenary exhibition, which we're encouraging people to make a small exhibition panel, 30 centimetres square, to show. And just that it's a really good idea to do these exhibition pieces, because they can push you in a different way, and you can explore things that perhaps you don't have time to do normally. But they can be really useful and quite fun to do. So if anyone does want to do that, head to the British Society of Master Glass Painters website, and there's some details on there. And I think that's about it, really. I'll open up and see if there's any more questions now. Perhaps Jasmine's got some you can field.
Thank you, Rachel. You can keep your screen open if you like, because we might want to have a look at some of the images in a bit more detail. That was a fantastic whiz through some extraordinary panels, and it makes such a difference, although I've seen these panels several times, to have you talk about it and look at the details. So thank you so much. I'm going to kick off as usual with one of my own questions, because I'm selfish like that, and then feed into some other questions. And I wanted to know, Rachel, it seems that a lot of your starting points for some of these panels are actually illustrations, whether it's from book illustrations or cartoons, or even kind of the images of the Charles Payne and Daisy Luther designs. And I wondered if that was often the starting point for your glass, and do you think because of your training as a printmaker, do you maybe approach your stained glass work starting with an image, and then the glass and the colour and everything comes second, and whether you might want to just reflect a bit on that process?
Well, when I was at art school, the first one I went to, when you had to choose what subject you're going to specialise in, I was always told I should do illustration, and I resolutely refused to, because I wanted to be an artist and do my own thing, and it was far too commercial. But now I suppose I do find myself doing more of that illustrative work. Well, I suppose it does start with the image, sometimes a poetry or something like that. but the glass is just so important to the work that it's all about getting my hands on the glass. And I even went to Germany in July to stock up and brought back some colours and textures that I hadn't had that I've used in these, and it just gets me so excited. So it is always a starting point, but the end point is really the glass. Yeah.
And if you ever go on a stained glass tour with Rachel, you will be able to look over her shoulder and see her amazing sketches of glass, because there is something about the process that when you're looking at windows, you like to sketch the details and get it down on paper, and it's really fabulous seeing that kind of process in action. And we do have your sketchbook open on one of the pages on display at the museum at the moment. Okay, a question from Sophie, and I think this is particularly related to the nursing series of panels, because you talked about the fact that the glass is not acid etched, but it's engraved. Could you explain a bit what you mean by the engraving, and is it with a drill?
Yes, it is. It's a Dremel, so it's a flexible drill with a diamond head on, and add a bit of water so it doesn't wear out so quickly. And it's really the challenge is to find the thin flashed glass that's fairly quick. Some of it is much deeper flashed, and then you get a different effect. But it's getting the colours that aren't necessarily available in this country, which is why I've been to Germany a few times to buy it, because English Antique do some lovely glass, and some of it is very thin and easy to engrave. But they don't have a wide range of colours.
Brilliant. So that also answers John's question, because he was asking if the glass was flashed or enamel. Yes. And it is flashed glass.
All flashed except for the first series, the Labours of the Months. At that point, I did use enamel, and it was after that I decided not to, because I didn't like the it wasn't as pure to me as using the actual glass and stain, which is what I do now.
Brilliant. We've got a few more questions, some on techniques, but I'm just going to read out Pat Bray's comment, because I know Rachel can't see it, and she says, a sailing friend of ours returned from a long trip in the Baltic to find they had to go into self-isolation for 2 weweeks, so he hoisted a yellow quarantine flag on the gatepost, but no one knew what it meant.
Okay. That's brilliant.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions about lead lines here. Sticking with the technical theme for a moment, do you think about where the lead lines go as you draw the first design, or does the design come first, the lead lines second? Two people asked that question.
Okay, well, all these panels are fairly small, so I don't exactly do a design. I do the cartoon and then work backwards. So once I've got I'll do it in charcoal first and shift it all around, and the lead lines are there at the beginning. And then when I've got the charcoal drawing, I will shrink it down and then do a little watercolour of how the colours are going to break up. And then there's a pencil drawing after that, which is much more detailed. It's very hard to change your mind when you're doing stained glass. It's not impossible, but if you're doing it and then you've decided you want something else, it's quite an effort. So I do tend to work everything out before I begin, if I can.
Fantastic. John notes that Tinker Tailor and the Seven Ages of Man are both poetic in origin, and wonders if poetry has inspired earlier works, and how important that is.
Yes, I've done a few with poems. There was one based on Fernhill, and the Poppy one, which is in Flanders Fields. And again, I think I think poetry is very evocative. It can capture something very economically, which I really like, and it can stick in your head.
Fantastic. There's a question here about a detail in the nursing panels. Italia noticed that some of them have a stitched kind of border.
Oh, yeah.
And wondered whether there's a reason for that. Yeah, let's have a look. I noticed that too. Looks like it was quite painstaking to produce. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, so I wanted this one to be a kind of warm, comforting quilt, even though it's dealing with a difficult subject. So I've tried to make it look like a patchwork quilt, which seemed to fit with these little panels that I was including as well. I was just trying to find different ways to include them. So in each panel, they're all slightly different. This one is a quilt. The previous one was little gift tag type things. And the first one, what was that one? Oh, the stamps, yeah.
It's wonderfully textured. It does add a lot to the panel, but also doesn't distract from the main frame. So it really works very well.
Yeah, so all of that is flash glass in the border, flashed or streaky. And just to get that range of colours is just lovely to work with. Yeah.
Another detail technique, and it is hard not to kind of draw in the detail because your eye does get drawn into these wonderful panels. Emily asks, she noticed on your seasons piece, the winter one with the frost on the stems.
Oh, that one.
And wondered if you might say a bit how you achieve that effect. There's always lots of artists wanting to know specific technical details.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
You don't have to give away any secrets.
No, I teach it all in my workshop, so anyone can come and learn it. And it's not a secret. There we go. So again, this is a flash glass, and it's engraved. And then the engraving, I paint on it as well and fire it. And then the engraving is sealed with the mixing flux that I use, soft flux, which then makes it shiny, gives it a luster, and yeah, it's just a nice technique I've sort of evolved.
Fantastic. And I'm going to return to Tinker Tailor series for some final questions, because obviously they capture our current social history really quite extraordinarily. And I just wondered, when you were creating these pieces, how quickly did you come up with a scenario for each subject? I mean, were some easier than others? Can you give us a bit more insight into that?
Yeah, some of them were came up quite quickly, and I do try and follow my thought process when I have it. If a thing pings in my head, I will use it and I'll grab onto it. So but yeah, these ones were quite quick. I think the one I struggled with was the sailor. What was he going to be doing? So initially I had him holding a mobile phone or binoculars, and then someone else suggested the flag, and I latched onto that. These were quite quick. The thief was a hard one, actually. I was initially thinking that it would be someone at a computer doing some fraud, stealing money that way, and it just wasn't very fun, or it was very hard to sort of show that. And then a friend of mine who worked in a shop, I was telling her about them, and she said, "Oh, thief, you can do someone stealing the hand sanitizer, which they do all the time here." So then I had that one. So that was probably the last one.
Yeah, and I think probably if there was one that we all understood exactly what this scene was and when it took place, the face mask, the sanitizer, the toilet roll, it does really encapsulate that, and it certainly has produced a smile in visitors as they've been looking at the last few days. Jo has a brilliant question, and she rightly says you're a natural storyteller, and you've captured this amazing piece of social history in these panels really beautifully, and she wonders where you see your panels in 20 years' time.
Oh,
question.
Yeah. Well, it'd be great if some national collection bought them off me, but I suppose one of the reasons for doing them was to try and get a body of work together that I can actually link to a gallery and try and sell, so that I can do more of this kind of work in the future, because as I said, it's not really funded until you sell it, and it does take quite a chunk of time. So ideally I would sell them, and if they went to a public collection, that would be amazing. But yeah, it would be a case of if anyone can and wants them.
There we go. There's still lots of people on the call, so everyone has heard that. It would be great if they were in a public collection.
Yeah.
A couple of people have asked a kind of fairly general question, but it's again about your approach and your influences and the intersection of this social and personal history, because all of these panels in some way touch on personal experience, whether it's family or something you've seen on the news or heard from a friend. So it's showing that kind of epic with the ordinary and everyday. So is this something that you deliberately try and do in your work? Is it just a matter of kind of spending lots of time with the themes and talking to people? How does that kind of come out in your work? What's the process?
Well, I suppose I have the idea, and I kind of try and do it. So I haven't asked people's permission to, you know, I didn't ask my dad about doing the 7 Ages, about him. I just more or less presented it and said, this is what I'm doing, and people haven't complained yet. But I suppose it is that touching, trying to use something personal, but that touches, that resonates. And I sort of think, well, if it's resonating with me, it's probably gonna mean something to other people as well.
Fantastic. And how long did it take to produce the Tinker Tailor panels?
Yes, I began them in May and finished them in October, I think. So
it's the duration of the first lockdown.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I did do a couple of small commissions in that time as well, but as I say, there were less distractions, and that is the thing, that if I can get a run at something, it's so much easier than stopping and starting. So when I start on a piece, I do try and just push through with it, even though that can be quite hard sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 2 final questions, Rachel, if you're happy to answer 2 more questions. The first is about style, and when you make your next series of panels, whatever that's going to be, will you be designing in the more pared back style like you have with Tinker Tailor, or will you be returning to the more detailed, heavily painted and drilled panels?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that yet, because I haven't really got an idea for my next one yet. Oh, I have sort of got an idea, but I think it's quite hard to leave the other bit behind, you know, wanting to fill it with all the world and his wife. So I think I probably will be a bit more of that, but I would like to be able to come back to this as well. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I feel there's a bit of a transition going on to link these more to the lino cuts. That was part of the reason for doing the lino cuts, that I love that it's either black or it's white, it's there or it isn't. And I think there's more to be done to find out what the final thing is, but I don't think there is going to be a final style, because it's evolving anyway.
Fantastic. And that kind of, you touched on this a bit because you said you have got a sort of idea, and Ting would really like to know, and I think we all, what are you working on now or next?
Okay, so I've got well, I've obviously got to do my piece for the centenary, which I haven't started. So that's going to be a wine lover's window, all the colours of the wine. So I've kind of got that in my head, but I haven't got it out there yet, so it's still very fluid. And then I've done one panel which I haven't shown you tonight, which is inspired by Handel's Water Music, and it's St Paul's Cathedral with fireworks and the river. And I thought I might turn that into, expand on that. So I do some more, so I make a glass quartet. So there'll be 4 panels inspired by music next, hopefully.
Exciting. I think we're all delighted to hear that you're already thinking about the next lot of pieces, and we're delighted that you're carrying on that inspiration. It's been really fantastic to see your pieces tonight, Rachel, and hear you talk about them more. Just a reminder to everyone who's joined us tonight that you can come and see the Tinker Tailor series panels at the Stained Glass Museum, along with the lino cut, and some of the lino prints are actually available for sale from the museum and also from Rachel's website. And we also have a set of postcards of the Tinker Tailor panels for sale on the museum's website. I think the link is in the chat. So if you know someone who might be cheered by seeing the kind of the funny year that we've had immortalised in stained glass in postcard form, you can buy them and send them to them for Christmas. So do have a look at that. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you especially to Rachel for giving her time to talk about her artwork with us. It's always so great to hear from the artist. I say this several times, but it makes such a difference to the way that we look at these works, and we see things that we might not have seen if they weren't pointed out. So it really enriches the whole experience. So thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you everyone else for joining us, and we wish you a very Merry Christmas. This is the last Stained Glass Museum event of the year. We hope that you're all keeping safe and well. The museum is open except for a week when we're closed over the Christmas week, so do come and visit. It's quite quiet at the moment, so fairly safe if you want to get out of the house and come and have a visit. We hope to see you soon. Thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.